A Republican judge just compared Trump's actions to slave catchers. Yes, you heard that right. A senior federal judge, appointed by Reagan no less, made an astonishing comparison, saying the Trump administration's actions are like hunting down and re-enslaving freed slaves. And this wasn't just a passing remark. It was part of an official legal ruling that sent shockwaves through the entire legal community. Why should this matter to you? Because this is a power play that could happen to anyone, anywhere. We're talking about high-level government officials, secretaries of state, Homeland Security, possibly even the president, working to suppress your rights with no hesitation, no remorse. But here's the kicker. This isn't just a political drama. The stakes are higher than you think, and the consequences are way more far-reaching than you could imagine. Stick with me, because you're about to find out how deep this goes and why it could impact all of us. So what's the real story here? A senior federal judge, Judge Young, just uncovered a massive conspiracy that goes all the way to the top of the Trump administration. He's talking about cabinet secretaries, the likes of Marco Rubio and Christine Noem, pulling strings to undermine your constitutional rights. This wasn't just a simple misunderstanding. This was an intentional attempt to suppress First Amendment rights on a scale we've rarely seen before, and it's not the first time this has happened. This is part of a much larger pattern. The Trump administration's push to silence opposition, it didn't just start with this case. This is part of a broader strategy that goes after anyone who dares to speak up. And while that's scary enough, what's worse is how they've tried to make it look legal. You might be wondering, how is this even possible? How are these officials getting away with what looks like a clear violation of constitutional rights? Stay with me, because you're about to see just how high the stakes are. The bigger picture here is more terrifying than any of us could have imagined. Judge Young didn't hold back. He's made a massive claim. High-level officials in the Trump administration conspired to crush First Amendment rights. And he didn't just say it, he proved it. The evidence was undeniable, and the judge's words were sharp. He called out top officials, including Marco Rubio and Christine Noem, for their direct role in this abuse of power. Now, you might be thinking, this sounds crazy, but is it really as bad as it seems? Here's the kicker. Judge Young used language that's hard to ignore, terms like conspiracy and infringement, and he wasn't pulling punches. He even went so far as to say these were the highest-level cabinet members involved in this attack on your rights. This wasn't some rogue action. This was coordinated and deliberate. But here's where things get even more chilling. The Trump administration didn't just try to silence people. They actively worked to erase them. Students, professors, peaceful protesters just disappeared into ICE detention facilities without due process. And when they were finally released, it was after months of unjust detention. Notice what's missing from the conversation? Accountability. No one's talking about how this system was allowed to operate unchecked. That's what Judge Young is calling out, and it's why his ruling could change everything. As the case progressed, it quickly became clear this wasn't just a one-off mistake. The Trump administration's actions were part of a disturbing trend that keeps escalating. This wasn't the first time high-level officials used their power to silence dissent, and it won't be the last if this goes unchecked. Think about this for a second. The same system that allowed for the unjust detention of protesters also normalized the silencing of voices it didn't agree with. And now Judge Young is stepping in, calling out the very top officials in the government for breaking the law. And here's where it gets truly terrifying. We're not just talking about one rogue action. We're talking about a systemic abuse of power. Historically, this kind of behavior has been seen before. It's not new, but what's different now is how it's being accepted, how these violations are slowly becoming normalized. This is a dangerous precedent. And if we let this slide, the line between what's acceptable and what's not could blur beyond recognition. Now watch how fast this escalates. If Judge Young's ruling stands, this could be the beginning of a major shift in how we protect our rights. The Trump administration's attempt to quash the First Amendment could be exposed for what it really was, a direct attack on democracy itself. Judge Young didn't stop at just calling out the actions of the Trump administration. He went even further, shining a light on something even more disturbing. The Trump administration didn't just try to suppress speech, they denied it outright in front of a federal judge. In the courtroom, the Trump team had the audacity to look Judge Young in the eye and say, "You don't have jurisdiction here, you can't fix this." Imagine that. They were brazen enough to dismiss the authority of a senior federal judge, essentially saying that the constitutional violations didn't matter. This wasn't just an argument about power, this was about refusing to acknowledge the law. But here's the line that changes everything. Judge Young didn't back down. He refused to accept their claim. And in doing so, he not only exposed the depths of the administration's overreach, but also forced the conversation into the open. This wasn't about politics anymore. This was about the rule of law. What's more, the judge called the situation for what it was: authoritarian. This isn't just a case about free speech. It's about a government trying to quash dissent at any cost. The Trump administration's behavior has set a precedent for what happens when power goes unchecked. And what Judge Young's ruling highlights is that this is just the beginning. But wait, this story isn't just about one ruling. It's part of a chain of events that's unraveling at a terrifying speed. Just days after Judge Young's damning decision, the Trump administration went on the offensive. They attacked the judge personally, saying his decision was politically motivated. But the criticism didn't stop there. Then came the pressure from all sides. We saw even more activists, students, professors being swept up, just like Judge Young had warned. The administration didn't just back down. They doubled down, making it clear they weren't going to let anyone speak out without consequences. What happens if this continues? If this abuse of power becomes the norm? If the government feels emboldened to silence anyone who challenges it? What's left of our freedom? The situation is rapidly spiraling into a crisis, and it's happening right before our eyes. And it's only going to get worse unless something is done to stop it. Now let's take a step back and look at how this is affecting real people. Think about the students and professors, people who were simply voicing their opinions, exercising their First Amendment rights. These aren't radicals. These are everyday people who have every right to protest, to speak out, to question the government. Yet, they were dragged off the streets, thrown into ICE detention facilities, and held without due process. And it's not just the activists or the professors we should be worried about. This could happen to you too. Imagine living in a country where the government can target you for your beliefs, strip you of your rights, and throw you in jail just because you speak up. This isn't a hypothetical situation. This is happening right now. If this feels familiar, if you've ever felt the weight of living in a society where free speech is under threat, drop a comment below. We need to talk about this. We need to understand the gravity of what's happening to our rights. But this goes beyond the outrage. What's really at play here is a system that allows this kind of abuse. It's not just about bad actors within the government. It's about a mechanism that incentivizes this kind of behavior. The people in power aren't just acting out of personal vendettas. They're operating within a system that rewards them for suppressing dissent, for controlling the narrative, for silencing opposition. Why does this happen? Because power thrives in the absence of accountability. The people who can bend the law to their will, the ones who can get away with these kinds of actions, understand that fear and control keep them in power. The spectacle of intimidation is often enough to prevent anyone from challenging them. It's a chilling insight into how those at the top manipulate the system for their own gain. What we're seeing isn't an isolated incident. It's a pattern that has been decades in the making. And unless we recognize this for what it is, we risk losing the very freedoms that many have fought for. So what's next? Where does this go from here? There are two paths forward, and both are uncertain. On one hand, Judge Young's ruling could set a powerful precedent. It could empower other courts to follow suit and hold the government accountable for infringing on First Amendment rights. This would send a strong message. The law is still stronger than the government's thirst for control. But there's a huge risk here. What if the Trump administration doubles down even harder? What if they find ways to evade this ruling, push back, and further entrench their hold on power? The other path is even more dangerous. If Judge Young's ruling is overturned or ignored, it could pave the way for even greater abuses of power. We could see a future where free speech becomes a privilege, not a right, where dissent is crushed and anyone who speaks out becomes a target. The truth is, we don't know what will happen. But the momentum is building and the next move is already taking shape. Whatever happens, one thing is clear: this battle is far from over. So what does all of this mean? Judge Young's ruling isn't just about one judge and one case. It's about the fight for our basic rights: our freedom of speech, our right to protest, our right to exist without fear of retaliation for expressing our beliefs. This is where the line in the sand is being drawn, and we're seeing it unfold right before our eyes. But here's the deeper truth: the consequences of this moment are far from settled. If we don't act, if we don't keep pushing back against this system, we could lose what little power we have left to speak freely. And if that happens, it's not just a loss for the people in this case, it's a loss for all of us. This isn't just a story, it's a warning. If you want to stay on top of this issue and understand what's happening next, make sure you're following for more in-depth analysis. And don't forget to subscribe. We're just getting started.